Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and today's video is going to be a carry Abaddon build for patch 7.38b. So actually in the last patch, I did a guide and a build for support Abaddon because that's what the hero was good at the time, and it's still good at that, and now it's also a core hero. It's actually played in the offlane more than the carry position, but I'm going to do the carry guide because that's actually the ideal way to play it. Like, that's what you want to do in the offlane as well. It's just that in the offlane, you might go for a little bit more team-focused, defensive-focused items, which I'll show you in a second after we get through all this stuff. But if you wanted to go full offensive, full right click, full core Abaddon, you can go for the carry build even in the offlane. Now, starting with the facet, we're going to go with Mephitic Shroud. This is for core Abaddon pretty much every time. You could go for the other one, but that's more for support Abaddon. The cooldowns and stuff just kind of lend itself to that. We'd rather have the Mephitic Shroud because we're putting it on ourselves, not as much on allies. And so running around having that kind of pseudo blade mail is just better for farming and better for you in general instead of focusing on putting the shield on someone else. Then for starting items, we're going to start with, yes, the full magic wand and 3 branches, and that's because this hero is a universal hero, so your damage and your tankiness just going to be way better with all of these stats. And then you can use your first gold from the runes and everything to get those tangos, but you don't really need them level 1 or at the runes in general because you do have this shield that amps up your tankiness, plus this damage is just really good overall. And you don't necessarily have to go for the 3 branches and the full wand. You could go for a stick, some branches, and then the basics that build into a Null Talisman or a Bracer. I will say Null Talisman is getting purchased much more if you are going in the off lane, but as a carry specifically, I just don't love getting either of these small items. I know I've said that in a bunch of other builds in the recent patches. It's just not as good. I feel like it's better to just get this wand straight up, get the small stat items, potentially you can consume them with a tango if you need to, and then building straight into the phase boots and even straight into Orb of Corrosion, those smaller items for the slow, for the aggressiveness, for the damage. I just would much rather have this be my early items than going for one of these. But like I said, Null Talisman is getting bought a lot, especially in the off lane. Then for core items, the ideal item that we can go for as our farming item is going to be Radiance, and especially as a carry, you're going to buy this item. But if you're playing the offlane version of Abaddon, you can still go it, but just keep in mind that if you have a Lifestealer or some kind of Spectre or other hero on your team that wants to buy this instead, you can opt to go other builds, so you don't necessarily have to buy the Radiance. If you can't buy the Radiance or you don't want to, you can then go in for Echo Saber first, but you will always be buying this eventually on the hero anyway, so it is one of those things where it can't necessarily hurt to get it early. It does amp up your aggressiveness, but then it delays your Radiance timing and your farming timing, so just keep that in mind. But ideally, you get the Radiance first, then you go Manta just because this synergizes with Radiance. Also, all of your illusions applying this curse is really good as well, and then we finish out the Harpoon, and this can easily be our items, 3 items in our core build for the hero as a carry and even as an off lane. And then when it comes to late game, we can kind of mix it up a bit. We can go in for Basher and then the Abyssal. We can go for the Orchid and then Bloodthorn. We can even go Blink if we feel like we're getting kited. We need to get on top of people. Now, I do say finish the Harpoon first. If you look at Dota 2 Pro Tracker and a lot of the builds, people are just straight up finishing Harpoon because it allows you to stick on top of targets. But you could potentially not finish the Harpoon and get one of these smaller items like the Orchid or the Basher before going back and finishing this. But I would probably finish the Harpoon before getting one of these big items. And then the late game item would be Blink, and then you can do Overwhelming Blink. You could maybe get the Swift Blink, but that's not really what the hero does. I would rather get that tanky strength, like canceling Blink Daggers, kind of initiation, going to the front of the fight, because even as a carry, you're just very, very hard to bring down. Then eventually you will get the shard at some point, but it's not like a must-have for this hero in general as a carry. Then for situational items, like I said, Null Talisman is getting purchased a lot on offlane, and then you can get a Bracer, but I wouldn't do either of these for the carry role. I would mainly go Orb of Corrosion, Phase Boots, and right into my items. BKB you can definitely get if you feel like your Manta and your shield just aren't enough to purge or to go through all of the stuns and slows in the game. If it's a really, really heavy slow and stun lineup and you just need this item to go into the fight, you can definitely pick this item up, even though it's not ideal for the hero. Then, obviously, we have a bunch of damage items, or Nullifier for sticking on targets, AC just straight up damage for pushing and just tanking yourself up, Silver Edge against heroes you need to break, Butterfly, because you're getting a lot of right-click damage and you just want to amp up that evasion and your right-click damage as well. Then MKB if you're against evasion, or just adding that extra slow with Scotty can be overwhelming and punishing for a lot of heroes. I will say Ags is an optional in the hero, maybe late game, but again, it's more of a support item. Refresher, just to give yourself 2 ultimates, maybe even 2 BKBs, that kind of stuff. Moon Shard, and then Octarine Core as like Giga Super Ultra late game items. Then I switched over to my offlane build here, and you can see the only real difference is that obviously I said buy Null Talisman pretty much every game, but the ideal is still going for that carry build. It's just that now you can go for Vanguard, Crimson Guard, Heaven's Halberd, Pipe, Greaves, Lotus Orb, Blade Mail, all these defensive items that help out your team. Those are options from the offlane. It's just that if you really can get away with it, you would like to go for these core items. Also, I did insert the Quelling Blade in there because you can use it in the offlane or even in the carry situation, but a lot of times you don't even need that damage. You can just go straight in for these bigger items. And then you can still buy those damage items, you know, Silver Edge, Eye of Scotty, that kind of stuff. But as an offlaner, I still wouldn't really buy like MKB. I wouldn't buy Butterfly. I'd opt for one of these more control, more tanky items, even potentially Scythe of Vice or Octarine Core, just because you want to have some kind of control. You're not going all in for the damage. You're not actually the carry, even though the ideal would be the carry build. Then in terms of abilities, we're going to put our first point in Aphotic Shield. This is really good offlane or carry, just at the rune contest and just being tanky in the lane for getting that level 2. Then level 2, we're going to go for Curse of Avernus. Level 3, Aphotic Shield. Level 4, Curse of Avernus. And then level 5, Curse of Avernus, and then our ultimate. And that's because we're maxing out Curse of Avernus first and then maxing out Aphotic Shield second. Obviously getting our ultimate whenever we can, and then maxing out Mist Coil last. And the only real difference here is that you could get 1 point in Mist Coil earlier on in the lane just because you want to spam out that harass damage. It's also good for healing yourself a little bit when your ult goes off, or if you're in the off lane, you could max out Aphotic Shield first and then max out Curse of Avernus second. But Curse of Avernus is just so good for farming, pushing, harassing, hitting towers. It's really the reason that this hero can be a core. So that's why we want to max this out first. Then in terms of talents, you're going to go for the right talent at level 10. You can potentially go for the left talent here, even though it's more of a defensive kind of support talent. If you are an offlaner, you could go for that one. But for the most part, as a carry, or as any core, you kind of want to go for this right talent. It's just a little bit better overall in the way that you want to play. Then from there, all of the talents are pretty straightforward. They're all the DPS kind of, right-click slow talents. So Curse of Avernus DPS on the left, then or the right, then the left talent Borrowed Time Immolation DPS, and then Curse of Avernus attack speed bonus. That's pretty straightforward because the other talents are all really about defensive, healing, and all that kind of stuff. And so those are more for the support version of Abaddon. So that, everyone, is the best core Abaddon build for patch 7.38b. As always, guys, if you like the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.